All right. So let's go over the project requirements. These are very broad requirements, and we can certainly negotiate if you consider that your particular project falls outside the scopes of or the boundaries of what I am proposing here. Um, so first of all, you'll need to identify some two types of human actors, right? That can use your website, right? So, for instance, there might be a seller and a buyer. There might be a developer, some quality assurance. So, for the different types of applications. So, for an online store, a seller and a buyer would be an example of two types of users, right? And each type of user would have different types of user interfaces, right? To cater to their use cases, right? So for instance, a buyer can set the description of a product, can change the price of a product, right? Can accept a bid from a a seller. A seller can do the description and prices, can accept a bid from a buyer, right? A buyer can't change the description, can't change the price, right? But they can compete with other buyers to buy something from the from the store. So they have two unique set of user interfaces. Yes, right. So another one, if say it's a project management website. You might have developers, quality assurance, project managers, business analysts. Each one would have different types of user interfaces for their particular role. Okay, or an online restaurant, you might have cooks and waiters and delivery boys and receptionists and managers. Each one would have different user interfaces. So you have to come up with at least two types of users. Okay. Or sports, you might have a team player, a coach, a director, a spectator. For a fishing journal, you might have fisherman, a partner, a boat captain. Or university, you might have students, faculty, staff. Right? Each one could do different things. Right? So depending on the user, depending on the actor, right, you should have a set of pages that are tailored for that particular user. Some of the pages might be the same for both. Right? They both should be able to log in. They both should be able to register. Maybe their profile pages are similar, okay, but they might have access to the same domain objects, right? A product, but one of them can purchase it, but the other one can sell it, right? Can edit it, right? So they might have different types of relationship with that particular domain object. Then there's an admin user. The admin user should be able to have God-like powers, right? They can choose the role they want to be, right? I want to be a buyer. I want to be a seller, right? I can see all users, right? I can delete a user. I can create a new user, right? I can see all the information that is related to you, right? So if you're a particular user, I should be able to see all the orders associated to that user. I should be able to cancel that order. I should be able to modify any of the domain objects, right? I should be able to delete any domain object that is part of this system, right? So the administrator has God-like powers. Now, for the end user, these end users, their interfaces should be intended for an end user, right? This is as opposed to the admin user. The admin user is working on the inside of the company, right? It's okay for them to have perhaps lots and lots of tabular pages, right? Where you have long list of users, long list of products, and lots of tables, right? With lots of headers, right? For a power user, it's okay to be overloaded with data, right? For an end user, right, it's the opposite, right? It's we might be providing several pages for them to interact with the product, right? To be able to add it to the cart and be able to then provide change the quantities and view the reviews. They'd like to be able to purchase it, so billing and delivery, right? So we might spread it over 4, 5, 6 different pages, right? Again, because they're not power users. But for a power user like an admin, it is okay to list tons and tons of product in one single page, right? It doesn't mean that it has to be ugly, right? But it is okay for a power user to be overloaded, to see hundreds of things just listed in one single page. Right? For an end user, we might provide them for a way to paginate, right? We don't show more than 10 things in one single page, and they paginate, casually perusing through a long list. For an end user, right? For an admin, right? It might be okay to show 50, elements in a single page and expect them to scroll through this, right? So the expectations are different, right? Who the target audience is, right? So you should be able to tailor to that particular audience. Make sense? All right. The required data model, right? So you should provide a table or a collection that captures the attributes of all types of users, right? This will allow you to capture things such as addresses and emails and first names and last names, roles, their roles, right? Whether they're faculty or student or an admin, right? And depending on that role, right, you show certain pages or hide certain other pages, right? You show certain features but not other features, right? Depending on that role, okay? Again, at least two types of users. Domain objects. These are the objects of interest, right? Whether they're sports or movies or songs or products, trips, right, or recipes. So depending on whatever domain you choose, right, there would be a collection or table, right, that captures that domain object, right? So you'll have a collection that captures movies or songs, right? And there'll be attributes for each one of those, right? So the song will have a title, a length, lyrics, right? All sorts of things, and then you'll have a user to user relationship. A user to user relationship is some relationship between one user and another user, right? And that relationship might be that I am somebody's manager, right? So I might be somebody's boss. So that's a relationship between a user and a user. Or maybe I'm following you, right? So there's so I am following and you have a whole bunch of followers, right? So that's another relationship, right? So create some relationship between users. It could also be sending a message, right? I could send you a message, so some mailing, some messaging mechanism. That would be okay as well. Some user to domain object relationship. So there should be some relationship between me and some domain object, right? So I like a song, right? Or I like a movie, right? Or I can create or perhaps I create a review or some comment about that element, about that particular domain object, right? So ideally, I would create some kind of I visit a particular domain object, maybe a song or a movie, right? And down below, I can see all the reviews and comments about that particular domain object, right? Generated by dozens of other users who have also created comments or reviews for that particular domain object. Make sense? Okay. Then there should be a domain-to-domain relationship, right? So, for instance, you might be able to group domain objects into larger, more abstract domain objects. Perhaps movies could be in a CD, right? So a CD is a domain object, and each CD might have many songs on it, right? Right? Or you might have movies and actors, right? So movies it's kind of like a collection of actors, right? But that's kind of like a many-to-many relationship, right? Where so a movie might have many actors, but an actor could have acted in many movies, right? So that would be a relationship between two domain objects. Make sense? All right. So that's also required. There should be at least one-to-many relationship. One-to-many relationship. Where, for instance, one CD might have many songs, right? One user, and this is between the domain objects. One-to-many relationship between the domain objects, and one many-to-many relationship between the domain objects, such as actors and movies, right? One actor can be in many movies, but one movie can have many actors, right? Right. So here's a very generic. Here's a couple example of some UML class diagrams. Actually, this is a very generic class diagram, right? So here's a user, right? And here's a user association, a user of type 1 associated with a user of type 2, right? Or you could have a user that has a self-reference, the same type of user associated with another type of this user of the same type. For instance, we might be two different. We both might be employees, right? But I am your manager, right? But we're the same type of user, right? Then you can have a relationship between a user having a one-to-many with a domain object, okay? And that domain object can have a one-to-many relationship with another domain object. So one domain object can have many other domain objects. Perhaps, a CD can have many songs, right? Or a song, or our band might have many singers, right? But then each singer might have be part of many different, throughout their careers, and might be part of many other bands, right? So there could be a many-to-many relationship here, right? So this is very generic. You don't have to do all the relationships here, right? Not all of them, but here's a very generic. Here's a couple more. Here's a seller and a buyer, right, that are sending messages from between each other. A buyer can review different products. So here's a product, and here's a self-referencing relationship between a product and itself, where you can create categories of products, right? So it might be a top-level category, right, and under there you could have several subcategories, right, and within this hierarchical tree, the leaves would actually be physical products, right? And all the branches would be different categories within that tree of products. Buyers can create reviews for a product. A seller might have different stores, right? And each store might have different products. Okay. Here's what's this? Here's for an art website that you might have different artists that might have, when they log in, they might have different portfolios. Each portfolio can contain different pieces of art, right? And those pieces of art can be part of an exhibition, right? So an exhibition can have many pieces of art, and a gallery can have many exhibitions, right? You can have two types of users, maybe an artist and a curator, where the curator curates a gallery or curate many galleries, right? Can have associated to many different galleries. There might be different types of art pieces. You might have hand-drawn or photos or poems and short stories or audio files, right? Or hand-drawn might be sketches or charcoal or oil hand-drawn paintings. Okay. So again, these are just a couple of ideas. What's this? So here's one where you might have faculty and students sending messages to one another, and you can have a faculty teaching several sections of a particular course, right? So one course might have different sections, and different faculty might be associated to teach a particular section, right? Now the student can be enrolled in many different sections, so this is like a many-to-many relationship that says, this user is enrolled in these sections, right? And this section has many enrollments from different students, right? Also, teachers, a faculty can teach many different sections, but a section could be taught by many different faculty. It could, if you're co-teaching. Also, a faculty can author many different courses, right? And many faculty can collaborate authoring the same course. Right? So those are some ideas on some data models that would be that would meet the requirements here. Okay. Some of the features that we're looking for is a home page, some kind of landing page, right? That explains what the project is about. It maybe has a motto or has a very short description, and then maybe a more thorough description of what it is about. Don't just put a splash screen with a pretty picture, right? And just an input field and that's it. If you're Google, you can do that. If you're Bing, if you're someone who we know who you are, the brand, you already know who you are and what we expect. But if we don't know who you are, please provide some explanation and what is it you're expecting me to do or type in an input field. So this is the home page. It should definitely look spectacular. It should provide also maybe some window into activity that has occurred in the website. Perhaps a feed of content that users have been creating, right? New songs, new movies that have been reviewed, or new sports team and scores, things like that would go here in the landing page. Certainly logging in and registering. You should be able to log in with a username and password, or also with a third-party authentication service such as Google or Facebook or Twitter. Right? You should be able to log in using those credentials, authenticated by those third-party services. Right? Also, the website should be mostly accessible for anonymous users. Right? Anonymous users should be able to use quite a bit of your website, okay, without having to log in. So, for instance, anybody comes here and you're I can search for recipes. I should be able to search for recipes and peruse and look at all the images, right? And look at all the reviews from everybody. But since I haven't logged in, I shouldn't be able to create any content or view any private information. I don't have a profile, right? I shouldn't be able to visit anybody's profile. Well, it depends. That's your prerogative, whether you can access somebody's public version of a profile, right? Maybe that's okay. That's your choice. Only when I need to generate any content or fill out any forms, right, or answer any questions, anything that I need authentication, I need to know who you are, right? Then I would ask you to log in. Right? I would ask you to log in, and so that I can enter it in the database, so I can know who you are. Everyone should have a profile where they can view their personal information. Also, in this profile, I should be able to access from here. I should be able to access all the information that is associated to me, right? So from this profile, if I generate any reviews or I'm following anyone or anything that is related to that particular user should be accessible from the profile. Okay, perhaps it should be accessible in a summary version, right? That if I click on the summary on any link, it would take me to the details, right? If I'm following folks, they would be listed here. If I click on their usernames, it would take me to their profile. Or if I have products that I'm selling, or I have reviewed, or I have liked, or have rated, right? They should be listed here, right? So I can navigate to their details page. It should provide me some search capability, right? That should allow me to search, whatever domain object it is. I should be able to search something about it, right? I should be able to search for recipes, search for sports teams, or search for movies or songs or whatever it is, and it should provide me with a summary of my search results, right? And maybe with a thumbnail, maybe a little title, some summary, right? In a tabular format or enlisted format, that if I click on any one of them, it would take me to a details page, right? In the details page, I can show more images, right? Show all the reviews that are associated with that particular object, right? Any reviews, any content that has been generated for that particular domain object. So there should be a details page, right? There should be some social networking features, such as people following each other, or bookmarking each other, or sharing something with one another. You need to use a web service, right? I had mentioned this website, theprogrammableweb.com, as a good starting point to search for APIs. Public APIs are out there. Yelp, Amazon, Best Buy, Walmart, they all they're all very, very well represented here, and I would start doing that right away, right? Because that's going to be the most challenging part of this. Is you might think of creating something, and the API might not allow you to do it, right? Or maybe you might want to provide certain features here that you have to pay for, right? So I would become familiar with this API as soon as possible, right? And see if it supports the APIs that you are interested in. User management, as a system administrator, I should be able to manage different users, add, create, or delete users. Yes? Yeah, no, the integration should be there. There should.
It doesn't have to be what populates all the data for the site.
Well, so say you go into. I haven't logged in. It's a very brand new website, and nobody has visited. I'm the very first one to visit. There is no content in the website, right? So it's not like I'm going to go out and download data to populate my website. It would only populate things as I interact with it. For instance, if I search and if I want to bookmark it, or I want to rate it, or I want to create a review, then I would make a record in my database that I have created some kind of review, some kind of association with that particular object, right? Now, locally on my database, I will only store enough information to be able to recreate that object from the remote API, right? For instance, if it's a movie that I like or reviewed, I wouldn't necessarily want to download the movie plot, all the directors, all the actors, and all that lives already on IMDb, right? Instead, I would store perhaps a thumbnail of the poster, maybe the title, maybe the rating, right? And that's it, right? And the ID, right? I would store the ID of that movie so that I could, later on, I could recreate the details of that movie by going again to that API, right, and retrieving the information, right? So I don't necessarily want to populate data in my database that it already lives on the API, right? Only enough that I can create summary lists, right? So that I don't have to fetch everything from the database, right? I can have a summarized data in my local cache on my local database. That make sense? Okay. Styling requirements, so it definitely has to be responsive. No unnecessary horizontal scroll bars, right? Only when it's absolutely necessary because it's an image or table that is too big. And even then, right, it should not overtake the overall scroll bars of the entire page, right? Only for interacting with that particular user interface, user element. No unnecessary wrapping, right? Make sure that as you resize your pages, right, from left to right, your website looks good at every single size of the page, right? You don't have any weird, as you make the screen smaller, certain elements are gonna not fit horizontally, right? So they're gonna want to wrap, right? So make sure that the wrapping is elegant, right? That is no unnecessary wrapping, right? If it doesn't fit, consider just collapsing it, right, into a small, sandwich or something that you can then expand into a larger menu, right? So don't have things that wrap in a weird way, right? That start putting things that overlap and stuff, and things that then you can't access, right? Don't look at your website only on a large monitor and on your phone. Look at it, all the way, right? All the way through, between the large screen, small screen, and everything in between, right? Those are one of the first things that we're going to do when we grade this, right? Is we're going to resize all your pages, making sure there's no weird scroll bars, no weird wrapping, all right? That things don't start overlapping over each other. Font sizes, right? So use font sizes and sizes of the buttons and the input fields. So again, with the idea that to make it as easy as possible for users to click on it, right, and start interacting with that particular element. Use some styling libraries such as Bootstrap or Materials or Foundations, and be consistent. Also, I didn't add it here, but I will add it. Make sure that the colors that you choose right? Work well with one another. That there's nice contrast, right? That you don't have white text on top of very light backgrounds that you can't read it, right? Or something that is very dark on top of something that is very dark that you can't read it. Make sure there's a nice contrast that is easily readable, and that's you have consistency, right? There's consistent across the website. If you decide that all buttons are going to be rounded corners, all buttons should be rounded corners, right? That you have if you're all H1s, H2s, H3s are going to be a particular color or size, that they're all consistent all across, right? Make sure that things are nice and flush, right? Nicely aligned. You don't have things that are jagged, right? That just go from left to right, right? Spacing, make sure you have padding and margins. Justification, make sure that numbers are right justified and text is left justified, right? Make use of centers justified very sparingly, right? Only when it's absolutely necessary. Tables, only use tables for tabular data. Don't use it to lay out the page, right? That's a very bad practice. Best practices, all throughout the semester, we're going to be talking about best practices, right? And so this is the place where you're going to apply all those best practices. Here's just a few. All code should be encoded in an iffy, immediately invoked function expression, right? So you don't litter the namespace, right? Content should be dynamically loaded when you need it, so you don't load all the HTML only on demand, and it's cached on the side. Single page application. Controllers should avoid using the scope. Instead, they should bind to the controller instance. Centralize your web service. So for each one of the entities, create a web service that centralizes all the interaction with that, with the CRUD operations that manipulate that particular data model. The file structure, we're going to be promoting a particular file structure here, yes, but there's some competing ways that you can structure it, and certainly choose one and stick to it. If you're going to decide to put all controllers in one directory, all the templates in another directory, that's fine. Stick to that, right? Or if you're going to choose to have views having controllers and templates in the same directory, stick to that, right? If you're going to have services all under one single directory, stick to that, right? We're going to be promoting a particular file structure. I would suggest to just stick to what we were suggesting here, right? Unless you have an overwhelming reason to choose another one. Deliverables. So I would expect that you have a short YouTube video where you're demoing you're presenting your project in the best light, right? So that's going to be your chance to sell us your project, and without us trying to break it or anything, right? Make sure that you show the best features. Make sure that if we're going to try and cover, right, all these, we're going to be looking for these requirements, right? But if you have this really cool feature that is not in these requirements, right, that we want to give you credit for it, right? So make sure you demo all those really nice features, right? Just a couple of minutes for introducing yourself. What is the problem statement? What was the solution that you proposed? And then a 10 to 15 minute demo of you going over your project. So it should be accessible through a hosted environment, right? So that's going to be the last 2 weeks of the semester. It's going to be fairly busy for us TAs and myself. So any help that you need, please see us before those 2 weeks. We're going to be secluded those last 2 weeks, trying to get everybody graded. Rubric. Here's a first pass of what the rubric is going to look like. Basically, trying to capture what we just went over in a systemized way, in a tabular format. But I'm not yet done. I'm going to do some little bit tweaking on this, and then I'll make it available for everybody. Okay. Actually, I'll make it available, but I'm going to have the liberty to to tweak it for the next couple weeks still. All right, and I'll let you know any changes that I make. All right. Any questions so far? Right. Okay.